You are listening to last month's Patreon Party People podcast, which goes up for free on a 1-month delay. If you would like to listen to the most recent podcast the moment it goes live, simply visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog and pledge $1 a month or more. You can now also make a one-time donation, and anyone who makes a one-time donation will instantly unlock the current month's podcast for everyone. All you have to do is visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog, and don't forget, Blaze Hedgehog is written like one word. Once again, that's patreon.com/blazehedgehog. Hello and welcome to the Patreon Party People podcast for May the 10th, 2017. I am, of course, your host of both this Patreon and this podcast, Ryan Bloom. Sometimes, mostly known to the internet as Blaze Hedgehog. Hi, how you doing, everybody? What's up? For me, I guess I'm doing okay. I don't know. I've re-recorded this podcast intro like 5 times now because I don't really know how to get into all the topics that we have laid before us. Obviously, up top, of course, we have to talk about the thing I've been talking about for like the last 3 months, and that is the upcoming move. I think this will probably be the next to the last podcast I record here in Colorado. I think we're due out of this house, around, I think, June 27th. So, we've got, a little over a month, we'll say 6 weeks, give or take, before I'm no longer in the house that I grew up in. And as always, that's a huge bummer to me. Like, it's such a weird thing. It feels, maybe this is just impostor syndrome talking, but it feels like I'm making an excuse because there's this weird, like, subconscious pressure on my mind thinking about this move all the time, about, having to pack everything up and get out of here. It's such a weird, like, hard to describe I can't even really talk about it. It's this weird, hard to describe sensation of just, like, malaise. It makes it really hard to focus on anything or just, like, be creative in general, which is, basically me saying that, hey, guess what? I didn't really work on Overbite this month. In fact, I didn't really work on much of anything this month. I just, I can't really get in the mood. And like I'm saying that, I know that sounds like an excuse because it feels like an excuse for me. Like, it feels like I'm giving myself an out to be lazy. And in some ways that's definitely not true. It's just, my life is up in the air right now, and I'm trying to do, I guess, the best that I can do. And I just have to keep in mind that, once this dust settles, I have to buckle down and I really have to force myself to get back into the gear of a lot of different things. But at this point, who knows when that dust is going to settle? But it's not all like down and dreary in the dumps, of course. I did try and work a little bit on Overbite. I did try and work a little bit on other things. I didn't really do much sprite work. I didn't really do much coding. But what I ended up doing, I've talked about this before. When I'm at work at the thrift store that I work at, during my lunch breaks, I will often just sit in the break room and I'll have my little Android tablet with me, my Asus MemoPad 7, and during my lunch breaks, I'll write. So I was actually pretty proud of myself this April. I ended up writing quite a lot, actually. Not necessarily specifically on Overbite, though I did end up writing more in the Overbite design document, just kind of, polishing and focusing down on, more level design concepts and things like that. Just, making sure the game has enough meat on its bones, things like that. But I also, just looking through my Google Docs, everything I've written in April, I wrote on, design documents for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 different games. Some of those I'm going to be keeping under my hat for now. Some of them are things that, I'm not necessarily going to be able to do anything with. After my... Oh, I got this, frog in my throat. After my How to Fix Sonic video, I've actually been, just kind of sketching out a design document for a 3D Sonic game, just to, get these ideas out of my head somewhere where they can live that isn't this weird, takedown video, because in some ways I don't really like how my How to Fix Sonic video ended up primarily this burn on another person. So, I've just been sketching out ideas for this Sonic design document. A baseball game, a horror game, a racing game, some kind of weird platformer / point-and-click adventure game, Overbite, an RPG, things like that. I also, I've mentioned the Jurassic Park video review that I want to do. That I'm writing a little bit on that. Oh, yeah, hang on. Something I'm going to stash in my notes for later. Though I guess I could probably talk about it sooner than that, but we'll talk about that later. That's something that just, dawned on me all of a sudden. Jeez, I got this thing in my throat that I can't get out. Heyo. Anyway, but yeah, I did end up it wasn't extensive writing, but I did end up writing a lot of little bits on a lot of different things in the last month, which is, it's at least something. I don't really have much else I can do when I'm in the break room at work. Sorry for clearing my throat so much. I know I'm mentioning it a lot. I don't know if I'm going to be cutting out the parts where I apologize for it, but it is allergy season, so, I've got sinus problems and things like that. But yeah, moving, trying to focus on being creative, and it's a struggle, and it's a struggle in a way that I don't necessarily know if I can accurately convey to anyone else, other than it just being this potentially weird imposter syndrome thing of me making excuses for myself, but they're also, legitimate, valid excuses, and it's a big, complicated thing. But like I was saying before, it's not all doom and gloom for moving. If you didn't catch it, I had this giant tweet thread as I was packing up some of the last stuff where, I was going through all this really old stuff, all my old Super Nintendo games, all my old Sega Genesis games, Sega Saturn, Sega CD, all my old video cassette tapes, Donkey Kong Country, what is it? Uncensored or something. I still have all those old promo Nintendo tapes. I have all these anime VHS tapes that an actual fellow patron sent me way back in my AOL days. That's that's some old stuff. And then even older than that was some of the artwork I dug up. Pictures I drew in 1994. Which, if you're not keeping track, that's 22 years ago? A really, really long time ago. And, speaking of that, when you're, going through all this old stuff, you remember things that you used to have. We've lived in this house, of course, 24 years. Going on 25 years, it would have been 25 as of this October. And... you remember having things and then they disappear somewhere. And in my case, I have this closet, right? And there are things in that closet. I'd say most of the things in that closet haven't come out of that closet since probably 2001 at the latest. For example, I have a Sega Game Gear. I don't know what happened to that Sega Game Gear. I have 7 games for that Game Gear and it's vanished. I was hoping that we'd run across it here in the house while we're packing, and we have not yet run across it yet. But we haven't dealt with the closet in my bedroom yet, so, if it's anywhere, I feel like it's going to be in there. And one of the things that I was, really anticipating finding was this very important document to me. I feel like I've talked about this somewhere else, Side note, I feel like a lot of my life is just repeating the same stories over and over again. I'm going to be a terrific old man if I ever get to that age. But there's this document that I was hoping we could find. When I was a kid, we'll say 1996, 1997, maybe around 1998, somewhere in that like 3-year range, I actually got into this big habit of sending snail mail to game companies. And it all started back in school. For a summer assignment in school one year, the teacher told us, write to someone famous, ask them for something, just like a souvenir, right? Like a movie script or a guitar pick, something like that. Something that they just, have laying around, some junk that they don't want. This celebrity, of course. And, maybe when we came back from summer break, maybe some of us would have like cool souvenirs and they'd display them in this case. All schools have like a trophy case or whatever when you first walk in. And kids, whatever they got back from these celebrities that we wrote to, they get displayed in this trophy case for the year. And I didn't end up participating in that year. Because, I was a dumb kid and I figured, it's not worth my time. It's not worth a stamp, whatever. And then we come back from summer break and, kids have like autographed scripts for The Mask starring, autographed by Jim Carrey. And they have like, gosh, I don't even know what. It was like, one of them was like a guitar pick, things like that. And, you see these in these trophy cases and it's just like, wow, that actually works. So, I realized, okay, I can't write to someone and say, oh, it's summer break. It's this assignment. The teacher wanted us to do this because obviously it was the fall at this time and, they'd be kind of on to me at that point. So I think I ended up waiting like an entire year, maybe 2. And I ended up like writing Nintendo, and Nintendo sent me like this like very nice high quality like print, I guess, of like Donkey Kong Country, signed by, they said it was people from Rare, but I've tried to decipher the signatures and none of them match up with anyone who works at Rare that is listed in the credits for either Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong Country 2, because it was right around that era, which I guess would have probably put it like 1995, we'll say, because that's when Donkey Kong Country 2 came out. And actually, specifically, when Nintendo wrote back to me with this 8x10 sort of printout of Donkey Kong Country artwork, they said it was exclusive artwork from Donkey Kong Country 2, and obviously it was just, it's like that generic promo image where Diddy is on Donkey Kong's back, and there's, Rambi and snakes and vultures and things like that all around them, which is obviously Donkey Kong Country 1 artwork. Like, gosh, come on. But anyway, when I got that back, and it is now framed in a picture frame in my bedroom right now, but when I got that back, it made me realize that, hey, wait a minute. It's actually really easy to send mail to game companies and harass them for stupid stuff. So as a kid, I ended up sending a lot of mail to like Sega and Capcom, and I think even Nintendo on more than one occasion. Just like sending them game ideas and sending them all this other kind of stuff. Like famously, I think I mentioned this in my How to Fix Sonic video. Me and my friends wrote up this design document for a Sonic game we called Sonic in Your Face, and it was named after the Archie Sonic comics of the same name. And we drew up characters and we drew up level designs and we wrote out a storyline and how the game should work and things like that. And we sent it in a letter to Sega, and Sega mailed us back and they said, oh, we're not taking game design. We're not taking suggestions, leave us alone, kids. And, that was the end of that. But, well, it wasn't the end of that because that's how I got into I wanted to learn how to make games. But anyway, all this builds up to is that there was a time when I wrote Sega about an idea and they actually said yes. And Okay, so this was probably, like I'm saying, 96, 97. I'm sure I could go find the paper I'm talking about right now and see if I dated it. But what this idea was, I guess we'll start as far back at the beginning as I can, because, I tend to jump around in my stories a lot, but it was an idea for toys. Maybe I mentioned this on the podcast before. It was these remote-controlled cars, kind of. Imagine, like, this big Sonic toy, we'll say probably 10 inches tall, the size of a remote-controlled car. This big plastic-molded Sonic. And, well, I guess the easiest comparison would be, if you know the Sonic 3 McDonald's toys, that sort of, there was this, like, Sonic Racer kind of thing. It was Sonic the Hedgehog mid-run, but he had this dust cloud behind him, and the dust cloud actually concealed a pair of wheels where, you lock him into this thing and you push a button and he'd shoot off like he was running, but he was on these wheels. And I thought, okay, well, what if we had an idea like that, but we scaled it up to the size of a remote-controlled car, and there would be like a remote where you could control him, and, we'd make one for Tails, and we'd make one for Knuckles, and I drew up, like, really basic schematics for these toys, and I typed out this letter to Sega. This was back, we didn't even have, like, a real computer at this time. We had this old... It's a computer from Hyundai, like the car manufacturer. And we got it when my mom was doing like this electronics secretary training job or something. And they gave her this computer for free. And it came with a dot matrix printer. And, instead of using a typewriter, you just write it up in the computer's word processor and print it out on the dot matrix printer and then mail it in. So I drew up these schematics for these toys. I wrote up this letter saying, hey, I have this great idea for these toys. What do you guys think of it? I wrapped it all up and I mailed it to Sega. Back then, I don't know if this is still like useful today, but back then Sega had their address printed like on the back of every game box. It didn't matter if Sega was publishing it, didn't matter if Sega was developing it. Sega was the one who produced the cartridges. They were the one who produced the packaging. So, they'd always have like this Redmond, Washington address. Was it Redmond, Washington? I feel like it was California. I think that's what it was. It was Redwood City, California. That's where Sega's offices were at the time. So I looked up the address on the back of the game boxes. I wrapped up the letter. I put a stamp on it and I mailed it to Redwood City, California. And the crazy thing was, about a month and a half later, and normally when I'd send a letter to Sega, I'd get a response within a week. Like, they obviously had a secretary who was like, nope, this is clearly from someone useless, just send back a generic response. This response took like a month and a half. And what Sega sent back to me was this super thick envelope. It wasn't the big tall manila envelopes. It was a normal sized, like, I guess they call it like business envelope, just like the kind everyone gets in the mail. But it was thick. It was real thick. And we opened it, and inside it were legal documents. Sega had sent us documentation asking me, I'd say us, but it was my idea. I'm the one who sent the letter. Sega was asking me to sign off on my idea as if either they wanted to produce it or they expected me to produce it. And I froze when I got that letter. I didn't know what to do with it. I was probably like 13 years old at this time. Here, let's do a little quick math. We'll say 1996 minus 19, I would have been 13 at the time. So, obviously I didn't want to say what year I was born in, but you can do simple math and figure out it was 1983. But, I was 13 years old. I didn't know what to do with it. My mom, as much smarter as she was than me, she didn't know what to do with it. We didn't know any lawyers. We didn't know where to find a lawyer. We figured lawyers would be expensive. We didn't know what to do with these legal documents. But it was still like one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me in my life, right? And when we were going through all this stuff, packing, I was desperately, desperately hoping that we could find that letter from Sega, because we kept it. We didn't throw it away. We didn't send it back. We kept the envelope, the super thick envelope with like 10 or 11 pages of legal documents stuffed inside of it. And we filed it away somewhere. And, you figure, you're unpacking, you're going through all these old dressers that haven't been opened in so many years. You think you'd run across it. And we haven't. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know where it went, but we haven't run across it yet. And that's really scary to me. What is less scary to me is that I was going through this end table downstairs in my basement, packing up stuff, going through old artwork. And in this end table of old artwork from like 1996, 1997, the year I was, 13 years old, I found a draft of the letter I sent Sega and a draft of the remote-controlled car artwork I drew for this toy thing that I sent to them, and they sent the legal documents back to me. So at the very least, this is proof that these 21-year-old memories of mine, I'm not crazy. This really did happen, because I have a work-in-progress version of the letter I wrote to them. And, it's less that, I don't think I'm crazy. It's more that this idea, this story I know it sounds so fantastical that there are going to be people that don't believe me. And at the very least, finding an old draft like that is one step more of proof that, hey, this really happened. If I was a little bit smarter about legal documentation, who knows what path my life might have led back in 1996 when I was 13 years old. But, that's going through old stuff, finding old stuff like that. I want to find my Game Gear. I want to find somewhere around here. I thought I had the very first picture I ever drew of Sonic the Hedgehog, and that has a lot of sentimental value to me. I found the very first picture I drew of Knuckles. That was probably the oldest piece of artwork I can currently find, obviously from 1994, but there is a piece of artwork around here, or there was at one point, the very first picture of Sonic the Hedgehog I drew in 1991. And, that picture, if any of you have read, like, the draft of that book I decided to write, that very first picture of Sonic has a lot of significance in my life as, like, developing my artistic skills and things like that. So, finding it is very important to me, and hopefully we still have it. We had a really bad mouse infestation some years ago, probably like multiple mouse infestations. So, there are things like hiding in corners in places where it's like, ew, we didn't know this was here, but like, here's all this, like, a nest a mouse built in like this bookcase that's been sitting in the living room, and nobody's seen it for all these years because nobody's opened the bookcase to see what's inside of it, because there's been all this stuff in front of it, like boxes and stuff with more recent objects, and like we had to throw away like a lot of like old VHS tapes because they were all destroyed by mice and things like that. It's gross. I hate that it happened. I hate that we didn't know about it, things like that. It's just, it's one of those reasons why we need to get out of this house, because that's not healthy. But this picture of Sonic, I'm worried that, maybe the mice got to it. I don't remember. Like, did they chew it up at some point? Did they shred it? Maybe someone used Sonic the Hedgehog as a mouse nest. I don't know. But anyway, that's been my April. So, that stack of artwork where I found like this draft of the letter I sent to Sega, I still have yet to go through all of that. I have, this big Twitter thread about all the old artwork I had. I do intend on going through that stack, photographing all the important pictures, posting them on Twitter. I still have at least another stack in my bedroom that I need to sort through. Stuff like that. I've got a lot of junk yet. I need to figure out if I'm throwing away, if I'm donating, if I'm trying to pack, things like that. And, who knows, maybe yet I'll run across this Sega letter, this jam-packed Sega letter full of all this old legal documentation. But, so far, the places that it was that I remember it being it hasn't been there. So, it's a bummer that we might not find it, but that's how the cookie crumbles, I guess. But yeah, that's been my April. I guess I brought up the book a little bit. I could talk about that. I've been thinking about the book a little bit more, about, the changes I want to make to it to make it a little more readable. A long time ago, I got all this feedback from a friend. He's like a teacher. I guess he's kind of a professional writer. Well, I say kind of. He is a professional writer, but I'm not really allowed to say what kind of content he writes. But needless to say, I have more than one friend, actually, that are like very accomplished writers. I'd say more accomplished than me at any rate. And he gave me all this feedback about, what I should do, how, problems with the book, things like that. So, I've been ruminating on that a lot. One of the things he told me that he really didn't like the name of the book. If you check Patreon and you find the draft of the book I posted like 9 months ago, it was called How to Kiss a Hedgehog. And he really doesn't like the name of that book. So the current new title for the book is Running in Circles, which I think is actually a really good title. And I have really good cover artwork I mocked up that I'm really proud of and things like that. I'd post the next big preview of the book, but because I think there's 3 or 4 chapters that you guys haven't read yet, on my patrons. But I think when I rework the book, I need to rework it before I show anyone what I've been doing. So, but I've been thinking about that a lot all of a sudden. I don't know why, but it's back on my mind again. Maybe it's Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces doesn't look like it might turn out to be a very good game. I mean, it's still early yet. We've still only seen one level from each of the 2 playable characters. So, maybe I'm wrong, but first impressions aren't very good on Sonic Forces. That's my hot take right now. And it's been hot for a while now. Maybe it's getting cold. But, yeah, thinking about the book, probably shouldn't be thinking about the book. I need to be thinking more about Overbite, but that's just what's been on my mind. The Jurassic Park video review is done, or the script for it is done, I should say. I should probably give it another once over. There's some research stuff I could probably do for it. But I'd say it's pretty done. It's a pretty classic Better Late Than Never video review. The script came out about 5 pages long, which I think is about the classic episode length. If we look at the Knights script, for the Knights video I was writing, that's 18 pages, I think. Is it? Let's see. Well, Google Docs is taking a while to load, so the Knights video is 10 pages, so the Knights video would be about twice as long as the Jurassic Park video. But, again, scripts are piling up for videos I can't do right now. So, that's something that's happened. Oh, of course, one thing I said that I was going to do is I was going to do this, review podcast where I was going to read the Zelda review into a microphone and see how people like that. And obviously, I didn't do that. I might still do that this month. I don't know. It feels like the trail on that's going cold. So I don't really know how useful that would be at this point. But, that's still an idea I have in my head is, podcast reviews for video games, I guess. Speaking of Jurassic Park videos, though, gosh, I might end up with another video review script that I can't do anything with. I guess we'll skip ahead a little bit, but one of the games I ended up playing this month is I ended up installing an emulator called Supermodel. If none of you know what Supermodel is, it's an emulator that emulates Sega's Model 3 arcade hardware. And I ended up, one of my white whales for video games for a really long time was the Sega arcade game Jurassic Park: The Lost World. I've only ever played this game 2 or 3 times in my entire life. And all these times were, back when Lost World was a brand new movie. And for the longest time, it's been this holy grail for me. I actually was really hoping Sega would have ported this game to the Dreamcast. because, it was right around that era. It was like 1998, 1999. So, I figured, it's a shoo-in. Sega's going to port this to the Dreamcast. So when I bought my Dreamcast in Christmas 1999, I actually bought a light gun with it. Not for House of the Dead, but for Jurassic Park: The Lost World. And obviously Sega never ended up bringing The Lost World out. So, I ended up getting this light gun for basically no reason. Even though eventually, like years down the line, I did end up with a copy of House of the Dead 2 for the Dreamcast. But, The Lost World has been this legendary game in my head because for the longest time I thought, Lost World is better than House of the Dead 2 because, zombies are slow and, dinosaurs are cooler than zombies, things like that. And that's true. The Lost World is a much faster game and a much more difficult game than House of the Dead 2, as I came to learn. And that's actually something like very detrimental to the Lost World, as I came to understand, because that's a super tough, super fast, super like skill-based game. And, just playing through it on the emulator, with games like that, I get kind of like this inner monologue running in my head that ends up sounding like a review. And then I haven't written it yet, but that's how like reviews start, is I get this sort of like running monologue in my head, and that ends up getting long enough where I think, I should write that down. So, I've got ideas bubbling in my head for maybe a second Jurassic Park video, talking about Lost World in the arcades. And, I don't know if it's ever going to go anywhere because I feel like everything I just said on this podcast was everything I wanted to say about the game. But, when you take your time to explain things, it can end up being a lot longer than you thought. That's kind of what happened with the Jurassic Park Super Nintendo script is, I put it off for many years because I figured, I'd have to do all this extra research to have enough content to talk about in the video. And, now it's a 5-page video and I didn't really do that much research on it, which is also one of the reasons why I say I should probably go back and do more research. But, maybe I'll do this Lost World video. Maybe I won't. We'll find out next month. Because if I don't do it by next month, if I don't come in here in the June podcast and say, I wrote this Lost World video review, then I think we both know that it's probably not going to happen. What else is written here in my notes? I guess we're out of the whole segment for, what I've been doing this month. And we're into the segment of just talking about random garbage until I run out the podcast timer. Written in my notes here, there's currently turmoil that Archie Sonic comic could be ending. Nobody's heard anything from Archie in, was it 2 months now, 3 months now? Basically what happened is December's comic came out, and then January rolls around, and January's comic doesn't come out. And Archie says, whoops, January's comic is delayed. So January's comic gets delayed to February. February rolls around. Archie says, February's comics are delayed until April. April rolls around, and Archie doesn't say anything. May rolls around. Archie still isn't saying anything. So a lot of retailers are starting to list the comics as canceled, and that's causing a lot of people to panic because Sonic the Hedgehog, Archie's Sonic series, is at like issue 292, which is pretty close to issue 300, and a lot of people, it felt like it was really building up to something for issue 300, like maybe, I don't know, that's like 7 months away, that's like a half a year away, but you know what I mean, right? Is that, it's reaching this really like gigantic milestone, and here we are, comic keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. Nobody knows what's happening. Archie would rather just talk about their stupid Riverdale teen drama series than telling anyone what's going on about Sonic the Hedgehog. And then just a couple nights ago, a user on the Sonic Stadium message board came on and was like, I have a contact at Archie, and he tells me that the book is formally canceled. They just aren't telling anyone yet because they don't want the bad publicity for Riverdale, for, the cancellation of Sonic to overshadow what's going on with Riverdale right now. So they're keeping mum about it for as long as they possibly can, but the book is definitely canceled. And, obviously a lot of the writers or a lot of the artists, all those people have kind of moved on now because it's obvious Archie doesn't have work for them right now. So, things are looking pretty dire indeed. But for my part, I don't really know if I believe that guy in Sonic Stadium. I feel like saying this, like saying I don't believe him, could most definitely come to bite me in the butt because, he could very well be very credible. And, but there's like a lot of these weird inconsistencies with this that I don't really understand. Like, because one of the things from this Sonic Stadium poster, he said that one of the things Archie wants to do is get away from comics like Sonic. They want to focus more on Riverdale. They want to focus more on their core titles, which, in a sense makes sense. Yes, in a sense makes sense. Yes. Anyway, because Archie financially isn't doing so hot. And you'd think, oh, well, if Archie's not doing so hot, then obviously, they should keep Sonic going because Sonic still makes money for them. There was a tweet from one of the writers on Sonic in like November where he said, Sonic still does very well for Archie in subscriptions. And, that was in November. But according to this Sonic Stadium poster, Archie wants to focus down to just the Riverdale books. And, if Archie's hurting for money, I can see how that would kind of like benefit them in a way, to, get back to basics in a way. Which means, getting away from Mega Man, getting away from Sonic, getting away from, I don't know, like their Archie action line, I guess. Just getting back down to what matters, the Archie comics in Archie comics. But at the same time, what throws me off about all of this is how abruptly it happened. Archie has comic books lined up for like 4 months after this. We have cover art for all the way up till like 294. So for them to just like abandon ship like this seems very weird to me. Like, I can imagine that they'd want to get away from Sonic, but you'd think that they'd at least wait until there was like a solid ending point, I guess, instead of just, cutting it off. But another thing this Sonic Stadium guy said is that I guess Sega is demanding more licensing money out of Archie, which I guess makes sense to me too. There were rumors that, Sega wasn't happy with the way Archie was handling things vis-a-vis the Ken Penders lawsuit. And obviously now more people are coming forward to claim copyright just like Ken Penders did. We had Scott Fulop, who claimed ownership of Mammoth Mogul, that stellar character that everybody loves and remembers, Mammoth Mogul. So, obviously Sega probably sees the Archie comics as an increased risk, and they probably want to get rid of them, or at least recoup some of the, what is the word I'm looking for here? Like a brand awareness, I guess, is the term I'm looking for. It was like a really like crappy sort of business term for this. It wasn't brand awareness. It was something else, but I think you understand what I'm saying, is that Sega wants payment in a way for Archie's screw up. They want to, I guess, teach Archie a lesson, I suppose, would probably be something I'd assume is going on behind the scenes. So, Sega asking Archie for more licensing money does make sense, which could be the impetus Archie needs to drop Sonic, even though it's this weird sort of right at the beginning of a new story arc, right at the beginning, right in the middle of like the Sonic Universe story arc, things like that. Like there are dominoes set up that haven't fallen yet. So, I don't know. It's all weird. It's all bad. It would be the end of an era, to be sure. And then, if Archie does end up abandoning Sonic, I can't help but think that Sega is smart enough that they would probably try and find a different, they'd probably like try and keep a Sonic comic going some way, somehow, right? because that was the whole Sonic Boom thing. Sonic X had been on the air for like 12 years, running the same 2 or 3 seasons over and over and over again. And it was still obviously getting ratings because it was still obviously on TV. So, we have this Archie Sonic comic book that's been running since, 1993. And that's like, 14, 20? No, that's 24 years, right? So if Archie does end up backing out, I can imagine Sega would immediately try and pick up those pieces and go to someone else. But, whether that would be Marvel, whether that would be DC, like Boom Comics might end up picking it up. Boom Comics handles Disney stuff, like Darkwing Duck was a Boom comic. Can't think, like, does Bongo Comics handle more than just The Simpsons? Like, I literally just named all the comic book publishing I can think of. Like, maybe Dark Horse would do it. Dark Horse has, like, a kids line, I think. I don't know, but anyway, I think that if Archie does back out, I think Sega will try and keep the comic book going in some form. I don't know if we'll necessarily see Princess Sally and the Freedom Fighters come back, even though I think technically speaking, Sega probably owns those characters, because the TV show that originally they all came from predates the comic book. So obviously, Archie doesn't own Princess Sally. Archie doesn't own Antoine. They don't own Bunny Rabbit. But I don't know. It's just, that would be a weird thing. But I definitely do think that Sega would probably try and continue something. And who knows? Like, if Sega does try and continue something, maybe we'll see the Sonic Boom comic come back under Dark Horse, Who knows? It's such a weird, vaguely depressing thing. Especially that it's not getting the closure I think it probably deserves at this point. But, that's stupid business stuff for you, right? I guess that's the real, like, big piece of non-video game news I wanted to talk about. I guess we'll move on to, like, games I've been playing. And to be honest, I haven't really been playing many games. Like, I haven't been working on many games. I haven't been playing many games. Okay, to back up, I haven't been playing very many games meaningfully, let's say. I have been playing a lot of games. I've been bouncing around to like 20 different games in the last month, but I've not really sat down and stuck with anything. For example, I tried to start Rage. Rage being the id Software shooter from like 2010, 2011. It was the first game they made post Doom 3, and boy, Rage is not a good game. I did post a Steam review of Rage. I tweeted about it if you didn't see it. To summarize, Rage is not a good game. Rage is sort of this... The parallels to Fallout are more than a little obvious, and it's interesting to think about this in the sense that Rage was also the first game id Software made right after they were bought by ZeniMax and Bethesda Software. So for it to feel so close to like the Fallout series is weird, but it's also like completely different. The story of Rage is that this big meteorite comes crashing into the Earth, and it incites like this second ice age, and everything turns a little bit Mad Max. And you're part of a group that gets basically sealed inside of a vault, hint, hint, wink, wink, to preserve humanity for when it's safe to come out of the vault. When, I guess the winter ends and humanity can scrape back into existence or whatever. So you come stumbling out of this vault. You're the only survivor of your group. Everyone else is like these weird dead mummies. You're the only one who was accurately cryogenically frozen, I guess. And you're immediately recruited into this, Mad Max world where there are roving bandits in buggies and, everything's the desert, everything's the wasteland, and you have to fight for your life and scavenge in the wasteland for materials and everything. And as much as that sounds like Fallout, the thing that really sucks the wind out of Rage's sails is just how linear the game is. It sort of presents itself as this open world thing. It's, like I mentioned, there's scavenging, which means that, there's materials you have to gather, things like that. But it's all sort of this hallway. You you can drive a vehicle, but it's only in this very narrow mountain range with, all these really high valley walls around you. So you can't really cut loose on the open road and go exploring. It's sort of, to like use an MMO term, you'll get a mission to go somewhere, and this mission will send you into a specific like bandit camp, and you'll get there and you'll load into like an instance, and this instance of this bandit camp is like a linear level. But the weird thing is that you visit these bandit camps more than once over the course of the game, but it's always the same linear level over and over and over again. And scavenging sucks. Like, just straight up. Like, you think of scavenging in some other games, and, it's like pulling open dresser drawers. It's sort of rifling through trash. Scavenging in Rage is all about just, like, there'll be ammo sitting out on a table. So you walk up to the table and you pick it up, and now it's yours. You scavenge it. Good job. You picked up the thing that was set out for you by the developer who didn't hide it at all. It's just on a table. That's scavenging in Rage. And the worst part is once you load into these instance zones, these linear levels, they are super linear, like more linear than they need to be, quite frankly. Because like you'll enter this room and it'll be all like this ruined rubble, and it'll be, overturned office desks and torn up couches and all these rocks and things, and you'll just straight up bump into an invisible wall. Like, the example I use in my review that I posted on Steam is that you'll enter this room and there will be like this clear like pathway you're supposed to follow with like desks blocking off the other half of the room. And they're just desks. This is an id Software game. This is a first-person shooter. So, of course, you have a jump button. But if you try and jump over the desk, you bump into an invisible wall. There's a whole like second half of this room that you are straight up not allowed to go see because there's an invisible wall that's blocking you from getting there. And for a game that's about scavenging, about collecting materials, about, gathering up cans of food and boxes of ammo and rags and all this other junk, and, there's a rudimentary crafting system in the game that you use your scavenged materials in, and to have this system in there, but to have instances feel so linear and have these invisible walls everywhere, it's terrible. It's legitimately awful. It's not a game I could tolerate for like more than like 3 hours, and then I uninstalled it because it's like, who would make a game like that? Who would enjoy a game like that? It feels so at odds with itself, like it's fighting against its own mechanics in a way that just feels super uninteresting, I guess, is the best way to put it, the most polite way to put it. So, my recommendation on Rage is don't play it. And really, that was the only thing standing between me and finally like trying Doom 4. So maybe at some point in the future, I will finally play Doom 4 because, Doom 4 is sitting on my hard drive right now. It's taking up like 75 gigabytes. It's the biggest game I have installed, so I should probably get around to playing that. But, after I completed Doom 3 last year, I wanted to see what Rage was about, and I saw what Rage was about, and then Rage was about garbage. So it got uninstalled. I guess the only game I've really stuck with this month, and I regret to say this, is the MOBA Heroes of the Storm by Blizzard Entertainment. To be quite honest with you, I only really started playing Heroes of the Storm because they're having an event going on this week where if you play like X number of matches with your friends, you get this like super cute Officer Diva skin for Overwatch. And I don't own Overwatch, so it's this weird thing where I'm playing Heroes of the Storm to get a skin for a game I don't own. But they had a free weekend for Overwatch last year, and I know enough about the game that Diva kind of doesn't really have very many good skins. And this, like I've said, this Officer Diva skin is like super cute. Like, I don't usually say things like that about character skins and things like that, but it's probably going to be the only good skin she has for a long time. So I want to get in there. I want to get this skin from HOTS while I still can. Yes, I just called it HOTS. That's how much Heroes of the Storm I've been playing, is that in my brain it's actually referred to as HOTS. And, honestly, Heroes of the Storm isn't really that bad of a game. I know there's this big stigma going around certain places with certain people of like MOBAs and loot boxes and free to play and everything, but to be quite honest, Heroes of the Storm is a really fun, really casual MOBA, I think. It's got all these different map types, whereas, the typical Dota, League of Legends style is only having one map. Heroes of the Storm has like 6 or 7 maps, and they all have different sub-objectives, and it's a really nice, friendly, casual MOBA for someone who really hasn't played very many MOBAs. Like, I played League of Legends when it launched originally, like 9 years ago. I played like 4 matches, and that was the only MOBA I've played until Heroes of the Storm. But, actually, HOTS is a pretty fun game. So, if you can scare up some friends and just do some calm stomping, that's not bad. But also, if you want this Diva skin like I do, Officer Diva, you do have to play ranked mode. So that's a little scary, but, that's the lay of the land, I guess. But, Heroes of the Storm, good game, oddly enough. Blah, blah, blah. Checking through my notes here. I guess the last thing is, yesterday TrackMania 2 updated and completely broke the game, which is a huge bummer as someone who's played a lot of TrackMania 2. Played a lot of TrackMania in general, let's say. Between TrackMania Nations, TrackMania Stadium, TrackMania Sunrise, TrackMania Canyon, and now TrackMania 2 Stadium. I've probably put like 300 hours into TrackMania in my day. So what happened to TrackMania 2 the other day is what I'm guessing Ubisoft did, and I'm blaming this on Ubisoft, even though they're only the publisher. What it looks like happened to me is that, okay, we have TrackMania 2. TrackMania 2 is probably 4 or 5 years old at this point. Last year, Ubisoft released TrackMania Turbo. And what TrackMania Turbo did was it took the weird sort of time trial gameplay thingy that was TrackMania, and it tried to make it work on like a game console. It tried to make it more mainstream, because characteristically, TrackMania is a game that isn't very mainstream. It's this weird multiplayer time attack game that, is like explicitly designed to be played on a PC. All the menus use a mouse. A lot of the hardcore players play TrackMania with a keyboard, things like that. So TrackMania Turbo on game consoles last year tried to take the TrackMania concept and adapt it to a way that the mainstream could finally understand. And I don't know how successful TrackMania Turbo was. I've only played the demo of TrackMania Turbo. Spoilers, it seems like TrackMania. But what ended up happening last night is it looks to me like Ubisoft took the TrackMania 2 experience, these weird mouse-driven menus, all this other stuff, and it looks like they adapted the TrackMania Turbo engine. By that, I mean they ported all the TrackMania 2 content into the TrackMania Turbo engine. And initially that sounds like, maybe that's not so bad. What this ultimately means is that TrackMania 2 does get like some graphical enhancements. It gets a better menu system that's, more usable on a controller. It gets extra effects. It gets things like that. But what it also ended up doing is changing how the physics worked. TrackMania is a very specific kind of beast. People use like mathematical algorithms to like very specifically plan out how tracks work, so that, if you're going at exactly this speed and you hit this ramp at exactly the right time, you'll go exactly this right distance. And people build like tracks around this. So in changing the physics by porting TrackMania 2 to the TrackMania 2 by porting TrackMania 2 to the TrackMania Turbo engine, they broke almost everything. They broke the entire game. I booted up TrackMania 2 today to find that all my time trial times, all my medals, all my ranks had been erased because with the physics being different, all the times I registered on these courses don't count anymore. And that's assuming you can even log in at all. Another thing this update brought with it is it seems to have broken like the entire login system. TrackMania 2 suddenly wouldn't recognize my password anymore. And I went to reset my password and it told me my activation key was invalid. So I had to go through, I had to jump through all these hoops to figure out how to reset my password the right way. And it's the worst case scenario for this game, I think. To just, so many people out there don't know how to log in. And then when they finally do log in, it looks like their account has been completely wiped. New graphics and a new menu system might be good in the short term, I guess. I don't know. But in the long term, they're basically saying that, they've essentially rebooted TrackMania 2 as of today. And not for any good, valid reason. They just did it because. And it is a mess on a magnitude I don't think anyone was anticipating. Maybe Ubisoft was anticipating it. I don't know. I don't really blame the developer Nadeo for this because I don't think they wanted this. I think Ubisoft has been trying to find a way to convert TrackMania to the mainstream for a while now, and this is just the next step in that. So, it's a big disaster, and Ubisoft's not talking about it. Nadeo's not talking about it. The game, maybe it'll get patched. It should get patched. I don't know if it will be patched, but hopefully it'll be patched. But until then, it's a disaster. It is one of the biggest disasters I think I've seen in a game I own in a long time. And, Ubisoft, man, I don't know what you're doing these days, but people need to straighten that company out, and they need to do it sooner rather than later. But anyway, that would be the end of this podcast. Thank you all for listening. We'll see each other next month, and then after that, who knows? You might not get a podcast until October. You might not get a podcast until next January. You might not ever get a podcast ever again. I might just fall off the face of this planet and vanish into the ether. But until then, I'll see you guys next month. Bye.